Thank you for purchasing this series that is going to cover the GE editor. I'm only going to cover the GE editor in this video series. That is to say, I am not going to cover the performance editor or the real-time controls editor or other basic things like getting the software up and running. I have a series on YouTube that you can look up that covers all of everything else. But this series is really going to focus on the heart of Karma, which is the GE editor. It's this section that is basically the whole point of owning the software. This turns Karma into an open sandbox environment as opposed to having kind of restricted control over GE parameters through the presets. Let's start off by going through this drop-down menu. The first item on the list is Help. When we click it, it conveniently opens up to the Help section that covers the GE editor. The next item on the list is Initialize Current Ge. This section is important because this allows us to choose our GE RTC model type. There are 13 to choose from, and these are labels and templates. So if I choose like a DM1 as a way to initialize the GE, it'll change certain aspects, but I'm not fastened to those changes. So like, as you can see, it changed the GE type to a generated drum. But if I wanted to, I could just click and turn it into a generated riff. So I could initialize a GE in any way that I want to, but I could make it behave in any other way. So I could initialize it as a DM1 GE, but then program it to act as a WS1 if I felt like it. But when you do this, when you choose to initialize it with a certain RTC model type, you do see that choice reflected in the real-time controls editor, and you cannot change that later without initializing a GE. So definitely choose carefully. Choose your label carefully. It'll help with organization, and it'll give you a good starting point from which you can start to program your own custom GE. But yeah, these are just templates, and they are just labels to help with organization. When you are initializing a module, you can choose, when you are initializing a GE, you can also choose to initialize the module in which that GE sits. So let's say that I have changed some parameters in the Karma module itself. Like I have it ranged and I have it transposed. When I am initializing the GE and I initialize the module itself, it will make all of those go back to their initialized settings. If I am choosing a base lead 1, it's going to initialize it a module differently than if I were to choose like an LF1. For instance, let me initialize it as an LF1, and you can see that my latch settings have changed here. I'll go ahead and initialize it again as a, how about a comp lead this time, and you'll notice that these two will change back to off. The reason why a module will get initialized in a different way depending on the RTC model type is because that RTC model, or I should say that GE, or technically both, depend on the settings of the module as well. LF1 is a really good example because the LFOs would not work correctly if we didn't have the latch settings correct for the envelopes. And again, you can, I go into more detail on what these settings are and what they do in that YouTube series. I'll provide a link to that in the description of this video. Another thing to note is that when you initialize a GE, it does not actually change the name of the GE. So that's kind of convenient, you know? It's not like the Chronos where if I initialize a program, it'll also reset the name. So that's pretty cool that they let you do that. The next up on the list is the Find GE by Name. Now, this is case sensitive, and you can choose to find a GE, or you could choose to find a performance. It will find, like, let's say that I type in WS to look for wave-shaped GEs, and then I click Enter. It'll bring up the first GE that I can find with WS, and unfortunately, I don't know if there's a way to necessarily step through incrementally, at least not from this window. You can choose to match the entire name. So if I choose to match the entire name and then I click this, since this was already highlighted, it's there, but it wouldn't even highlight if I chose to match the entire name, of course. It's kind of self-explanatory stuff. Also, when you are finding GE by name, it'll bring up the bank that of the GE that it finds with that title, but it won't automatically choose it for won't automatically choose it for editing in the GE editor. But if I click on another one, it will automatically choose that GE for editing. I'm going to get back to the GE that I was working with. In fact, I could just do it by finding my GE by name. I could match the entire name, and if I can remember it, I think I called it GE tutorial? Maybe that's not accurate. We'll find out. And then I'll just hit enter so that it's not accurate. So instead, I'll just find GE by name and then just type in GE, and I don't want to match the entire name. Yep, let's click that, and here it is, GE tutorials. Again, it did not choose it, but if I click on it, it'll drop it into the GE editor for editing. Next, we have the performance info window. This just shows us all the MIDI that's happening. I don't ever use this. I think this is more for like a programming and troubleshooting sort of thing. So I never really bothered to teach myself this section since it doesn't really pertain to me. We could check out the help menu though, and we could see what's going on here. This probably helps if you're trying to like create your own like sysx messages or control this software from an external controller. Send GE. Okay, this is a very important one. When you're creating custom GEs, you'll want to throw it into the Chronos, and so I can choose to send the GE, and it automatically chooses the destination of the keyboard that corresponds to the same save slot in the software. And then I can choose to execute, which will send it but keep this dialog open, or I could just click this this arrow. I could also choose a different location, of course, but in this case, like I don't want to like not overwrite my previous settings, so I can just choose the same save slot and send sysx data, and eventually it'll work. There it goes. Cool. We can also get the GE from the Chronos, and then we have load GE options. This actually just brings up the general options that you can get from the edit menu, or hit just Control plus and comma or whatever that hotkey was. So here you're probably not going to want to mess with too much. You could set these at your own leisure. The only one that I would suggest is probably turn on this Shift option or Alt keys required to move last cell in column. That could save you some grief later down the line when you're making some edits in the GE editor. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I am going to hit store at this point just because I am paranoid and I don't want to lose any of my data. All right, let's move down the list. The last one is clear unused GEs. Don't ever do that because that's going to delete all the GEs that aren't in use in any of the performances or anything like that. And that covers every aspect of this drop-down menu dialog. In the next video, I will cover all these other basic controls, and then I'll actually I'll probably create a separate video for this last section here. Okay, thank you.